Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with UK-based jazz saxophonist Dom Franks. We caught up with him about his new 2025 CD, Duality Part 2, done with his Dom Franks StrayHorn, featuring the Carducci String Quartet and Aiden Pope. And we also cover his life and the music. He is a former student of Jazz Messenger Jean Toussaint and is a previous winner of the Daily Telegraph Young Jazz Musician Competition. He formed his band in 2010 to showcase his harmonically emotive, lyrical, but groove-driven compositions. Over the years, the group has featured a revolving cast of leading musicians from the buzzing jazz scene. His touring schedule has taken him around Europe several times and to South Africa. It's a story you should hear from his base in the UK. We get into it all. Enjoy. Dom, great to meet you, man. Thank you for
likewise. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to getting into the album Duality Part 2 and your life and all of the good stuff. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That's a pleasure. Well, thank you. And your show. So you've been running the show for some time, have you?
Yeah, I've been doing this show since 2011, so I'm on 14 years now.
That's amazing. I mean, you know, there are a handful of long-running jazz shows, but I mean, that's an impressive track record.
It's weird how time flies, man. I love it. I've absolutely loved, this has been the joy of my life. I originally wanted to get into sports broadcasting and kind of venture my way into this world. And it's just been wonderful. I love the community. I think jazz musicians are some of the finest specimens on the planet. So it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure.
Well, let's hope you don't find the one exception today.
Oh, no. I have no doubt we won't. No, we're gonna stick with the tradition. So again, Dom, it's so great to catch up with you. Where are you located on the planet?
So I'm currently based in Cheltenham in the United Kingdom, which is, people tend not to know where it is, but it's near Oxford, as in the university.
Okay, excellent.
So I'm about probably 30 miles, 40 miles west of Oxford.
Okay. Excellent.
I actually grew up in Oxford, spent a long time in London, and then I've moved, back further west, and I'm based here. So it's in the Cotswolds, which you know in the States, right?
Yeah,
the Cotswolds.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm in the belly button of America. I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, one of the cradles of jazz. So
amazing.
It's so good to meet you. I'm looking forward to getting in to your album and your world of music. To begin with, before we get into Duality Part 2, I want to know, 5 years ago, this pandemic was changing all of our lives in the world.
Yeah.
How did you get through that era as a musician, and how did it influence the way that you make music and live your life today?
That's really interesting. I mean, it really affected people very differently, didn't it? And it certainly, I think there are a few different ways. So in one sense, it gave me some space to reflect. And I've noticed that a lot of artists maybe launch their careers, whereas they've been sort of sitting there waiting for something to happen. And the pandemic gave them the space to think, okay, what am I doing creatively? And to actually start something from scratch. Obviously, I've been around for a while. I was a player in London for 10, 15 years, and then I moved out here. So I've kind of got an established career. But it maybe gave me some space to reflect, to compose more. To think about what I was trying to say as a musician, to think about my voice that I expressed through, the band that I called StrayHorn, Dom Franks StrayHorn. It's obviously had some time with my family as well. And, we're very fortunate living in the Cotswolds, actually, that we are in a beautiful town, town of about 100,000 people, Cheltenham. And we're surrounded by amazing, hills and sheep and all the good, classic textbook British stuff. So we did a lot of walking, and I find walking really helpful creatively. So I spend a lot of time just out in the countryside, reflecting on life, and used a lot of that creative space to find inspiration for moving forward, for composing. So I'd say it was probably a reset for my band. We had to stop touring, but then it gave me some clarity about what I wanted to do going forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100% makes sense. So talk to me a little bit about this new album. What was kind of the overarching kind of vision and vibe for it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's my fifth album, I think, with Dom Franks StrayHorn. So I came to composition relatively later than some people. I had quite a weird upbringing as a musician, because I was a chorister So I was a boy chorister singing in one of the choirs in the Oxford colleges. I was at New College, and I had a lot of music from when I was a small kid. Not jazzness, obviously classical music. So I was basically kind of trained up as you are to be a kind of mini professional singer. And I thought that might be my route. You get spat out when you're 13, when your voice breaks. And I started playing the clarinet, but I knew that that wasn't going to be the thing that I ended up doing. So, I discovered the sax. One thing led to another, played nonstop, and, launched a career in my 20s in London and had a brilliant time for a good decade there playing. And I didn't really play my own original music. And if I'm honest, it's because I didn't have the confidence at that time that I had something to say as a composer. I could copy other people's music, but I think maybe I just didn't have enough life experience. So I did a lot of playing, played in all kinds of bands, played on lots of dance music projects, loads of jazz, obviously, a lot of like soul and funk. I did some promoting in a wonderful venue in Camden Town in London called the Jazz Cafe, which is great. It's like a 500 capacity venue. I was really fortunate to work there. I saw McCoy Tyner, hung out with him. Roy Hargrove, we saw his first hard groove gig with that incredible band in the early 2000s. I saw Joshua Redman multiple times, Jimmy Smith. It was an education. I saw Wynton there. Absolutely incredible experience. So that kind of launched me on. But then I think it was only when I was a little older in my 30s and I had kids that I had a bit of time. Well, I had no time, as you don't when you have small children. But it made me think about what I really wanted to do. And at that point, I realized that I'd listened to so much music. I'd experienced so much music as a listener and a player that I was probably ready to do something that was my influences filtered in my own voice. So basically writing my own stuff. So I started, like I said, a little bit later, started this StrayHorn band in 2010, I think, 2011. And we kind of got going slowly on a local level. And it's gradually built. We've released a series of albums. We seem to have had, more reviews and slightly wider exposure with each one, but it's built very organically. And there've been certain core members like Alex Steele, the keyboard player, who've been there since the beginning. But other guys have come into the band, or I've, formed slightly different iterations of the lineup, depending on the music we're writing. But like any jazz composer, I guess, it is always the sum of my influences and what I'm listening to at any given moment. Sorry, that was a very long answer. Does that give some context?
Yeah, it totally does. So ultimately, at the end of the day, what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
Well, I have released 2 albums consecutively. So Duality Part 1 and this new one that came out in September is Duality Part 2. And I think they were trying to reflect different sides of what I really dig in jazz. So the first one was a more kind of straight down the line Hammond quartet, so tenor sax, soprano sax, myself, and then a great Hammond organ player called Anders Elinda, who's from Sweden, and then a guy called Andy Tween on drums, brilliant Bristol-based drummer who used to play with Pee Wee Ellis, James Brown's old sax player. So he was his touring drummer when Pee Wee moved to the UK. So he's really funky, he's got that grit in the gravy. And then a wonderful guitarist from Bristol called Matt Hopkins, who's real kind of Grant Green, proper Grant Green meets Wes Montgomery, I describe his style as. So that was kind of straight down the line Hammond jazz. This new album was meant to be something really different, and it was more reflecting on my classical roots, as a singer and clarinet player, and also my love of Brazilian music. So I've listened to, Brazilian music since I was maybe 12 or 13. I love it. Absolutely love it. Everything from Caetano Veloso to Fabiano do Nascimento on the contemporary scene, Milton Nascimento, obviously, Tom Jobim, clearly, and this rich history of amazing music that maybe has combined rhythms from Africa with American jazz, harmony, and aspects of European classical music. They're the things I love the most. That rhythm combined with interesting harmony, combined with really strong melodies. So I think what I was trying to do on this album was to combine the classical side, and that's expressed through arrangements for a string octet, or quartet and octet, with my traditional jazz quintet, which is, sax, guitar, Fender Rhodes mostly on this album, and then drums and guitar. I've already mentioned guitar.
So talk to me about your beginnings. Take me back to where you were born and raised. How did music become your passion, and how did jazz become your profession?
Yeah, good question. Well, like I say, I started classically. So my mum and dad were both very keen, sort of good amateur classical singers. So, in the UK, we've got this, it's kind of a niche thing, it's not mainstream, but we do have this very long standing, centuries old tradition of choral music. And in certain centres in Oxford, particularly Oxford and Cambridge, but also in London, and actually out where I live now in Gloucestershire, there's a tradition of cathedral choral singing, which my dad had been a part of. He was a chorister at Christ Church, Oxford. His dad, my grandpa, was a chorister at Christ Church, Oxford. So I think it was kind of predestined that, as the first child, the firstborn of the family, I would become a chorister. So when I was 7 years old, I was packed off to, learn how to sing, to wear a dress, wear a cassock, and to get involved in that whole scene. And while that wouldn't become my life, I think that really influenced me, in the sense that I sang so much music when I was that age, much of which was focused on interesting layers of texture, very strong melody. We sang everything from Benjamin Britten and Bird. I mean, it's pretty obscure stuff, right, on a jazz show, but right through to sort of contemporary music by people like Stravinsky and, well-known composers. At the same time, that kind of opened my ears to harmony, just the amazing magic that you can create by changing harmony underneath a superficially simple melody. And that's always been something I've been really, really fascinated by. You can take a simple tune and you can cast it in different emotional lights by maybe tweaking the harmony underneath it, putting it in different contexts. And that's something I'm really obsessed with. So I think I first heard jazz actually when I saw the Blues Brothers, 1982. So I would have been, 7 years old. Blue Lou Marini walking the bar. How cool was he, right?
Yeah.
So that blew my mind. I wanted to be Blue Lou Marini and grow my hair long and, all of that. And then I maybe got into, I remember getting an Art Pepper record when I was about 12 or 13. And that convinced me that I wanted to switch from clarinet to sax or start playing the sax as well. Got really into Art Pepper. And then I heard some more European jazz. I remember my aunt for my 14th birthday gave me a Keith Jarrett record, My Song, amazing album with Jan Garbarek on sax, Palle Danielson, John Christensen. So that European rhythm section that Jarrett played with in the 70s. And that really expanded my mind in the way that it combined maybe more classical sounding melody and harmony with some really, hard swinging jazz. It sort of bridged both worlds. So I think that's how I got into it. And then I was really fortunate growing up in Oxford that there's a huge concentration of musicians based in Oxford, partly because of the university. So obviously, great university, you get lots of very, very strong musicians coming to study music there. So when I was in what would be your high school, I guess, our sixth form, when I was like 16, 17, I was friends with some slightly older people who went to the Oxford colleges, to university. They were older than me, they were better than me. And I got asked to play in some of their bands, and that just pushed me and pushed me and pushed me. And I ended up studying music later at the Guildhall in London, the Guildhall School Conservatoire, and going on to play, as I say. But I'm pretty eclectic in my musical interests and tastes. So, I equally love classical music, jazz, Brazilian, West African music. I try and bring all these influences into my own music, if not consciously, definitely subconsciously. So it's always a bit of a mixture of everything I'm into.
Do you remember the first live jazz show you saw that blew you away, or that show that made you want to be on stage?
Ooh, that's a good question. Oh man, there've been so many. Funnily enough, I'll tell you one that was really impressionable. I think the first proper jazz gig, I went to some sort of, in hindsight, some pretty naff gigs. They were kind of local musicians who were okay. But maybe it was more kind of mainstream vaudeville type stuff rather than really, gritty jazz. There was a lot of, good sort of amateur musicians around in Oxford. as I say, I played with some brilliant guys who were only a couple of years older than me, who were going to go on to be full-time jazz musicians. So I heard them. First proper jazz gig I went to, I think I was 14. I had this Art Pepper record, and I persuaded my dad to take me to a club in London, which is now defunct, called the Treble Clef. It only lasted for about a decade. And I saw a guy called Tommy Smith, who's a Scottish tenor player who'd gone to work he was very young, he was in his 20s. He'd gone as a teenager to play in Paris and had played with a lot of guys on the scene there. He then got a scholarship to Berkeley, obviously Boston. And it was his first gig on coming back to the UK from Berkeley. And this guy was going to show us what he'd learned. So I'd say it was one of those kind of fire-breathing jazz gigs in that, he was a young cat. He had a lot of chops. He's a phenomenal player, still plays. And it was this young band that he brought back from the States of very, very fine young musicians. I don't remember the rhythm section, I'm afraid to say. And that gig just blew my mind because of the intensity of the sort of execution and the improvisation. I'd never seen a jazz show that was like that. I heard a lot of stuff that was, improvised, pretty to listen to. This just was on another level of intensity. And that showed me something else. I then went to a lot of gigs. I saw Joshua Redman when he was first starting out in the early 90s. I basically went to anything I could in Ronnie Scott's, which was it's the best club in London. Everyone's passed through there. I'll tell you one thing, actually. So I'm about to come to the States. I'm going to be, not your part of the country, but I'm going to be in New York this weekend.
Excellent.
I'm very excited about that because I'm taking my dad for his 80th birthday present. Well, we're kind of taking each other. I should be clear. And we went to New York almost exactly 30 years ago on a kind of boys trip, like father and son trip. And we just went to all the jazz clubs. So we checked out the Knitting Factory, saw Ravi Coltrane there. Oh man, we saw Kenny Garrett in, I think it was the Vanguard. Checked out Larry Goldings with his trio with Peter Bernstein, Bill Stewart in Iridium. And that was the gig that particularly did it for me. That trio is one of the great Hammond trios of all time. And it was just, I think, the interaction between them, the fact that they had this almost sort of telepathic communication as a trio between the Hammond guitar and drums. Also, the fact that that night it had been raining a lot in New York City, and there was a drip coming through the roof, and it was dripping on Bill Stewart's head, just like a little drip of water every once in a while. And he was getting more and more angry about this drip. He couldn't move his drum set anywhere, and the angrier he got, the better he played. By the end of the gig, he was just blowing the roof off the place. So yeah, I'm very, very excited because almost exactly 30 years later, this weekend, I've just booked to see Larry Goldings with the trio in Smoke in New York. And I intend to go and bother him at the end of the gig and tell him what a massive impression he made on me 30 years ago. Because, that particular gig has fired me up for such a long time. It's one of the reasons that my recent album was a Hammond quartet, I think.
So let me ask you this. At the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, Tom. Every family, friends, fans, everyone that knows you on the bandstand, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
You ask the good questions, Joe. You really do.
Thank you.
I don't know. I increasingly, as I get older, the great thing about jazz is you don't, your hair falls out. Mine hasn't entirely fallen out, but your hair falls out, you stop being youthful anymore. And rather than becoming obsolete, as you might in certain bits of pop, you hopefully grow in experience, and hopefully through what you're playing, you can communicate some of that experience. So I'd say I am someone who tries to find the positive in life. We've had some tough situations in our family through the pandemic. I won't go into the details, but, one of my children went through a really tough time. And that's been, it's been pretty dark at times, but we've tried to find ways through it. And actually one or two of the tunes on the new album were written as a way of communicating the intensity of feeling I felt about what my child had gone through. Again, it's probably not relevant to go into the details here, but I'm someone who feels that the band I play with, when we play live, we try and communicate a sense of joy and playfulness and, I don't know, vitality maybe. I love interacting in an improvised setting with other musicians, and whichever particular combination of players I'm playing with, I don't want to just do head solos. There's got to be some interaction happening there, some communication, a musical dialogue. Otherwise, there's nothing going on. And that hopefully is the thing that people latch onto, that sense of enjoyment on the bandstand and sort of taking pleasure in that play, that dialogue, that communication that you can get in jazz. Not uniquely, but it's one of the most direct and honest and raw methods of communicating in real time in a musical context. So yeah. And I mean, as I get older, I get more reflective. So I guess some of the tunes maybe reflect the fact that I'm not a young kid trying to show off or anything like that. Yeah. Reflect a bit more maturity because of my life experience I've had now. Hopefully some of the slower tunes stereotypically on the new album reflect a little bit of life experience that I may be channeling through those tunes.
So if anyone wants to pick up Duality Part 2, catch you live, any of the previous albums, any of the good business in your world, where do they go?
Well, that's a really good question. So I'm old school in that I've mainly maintained a Facebook site. So if you look up Dom Franks StrayHorn, that is our official band page. I also tend to put out information about the band on Dom Franks, just Dom Franks from Cheltenham. That's my personal page on Facebook. More recently, I've got down with the kids and got an Instagram account because you need to. So, I mean, that one I'm beginning to develop. We have a Bandcamp page. So I don't have a website currently because I kind of feel like they're not really relevant anymore in the web as it is set up at the moment. So we do have a Bandcamp page. And if you look up Dom Franks StrayHorn, as in Billy Strayhorn, but not playing his music, it's sort of in tribute to him, the name of the band. Dom Franks StrayHorn on Bandcamp. You'll be able to find all of our previous albums there. And that's probably the best way to get hold of us.
Wonderful.
We hope to do a bit of touring in Europe next year. So that's something I'm working on at the moment. We're also going to do a UK tour. We've got a few festival dates booked in for sort of April through to June next year. Haven't yet played in the States, but I mean, that's certainly an ambition.
I love it. I'm going to put all these links in the show notes. Dom, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for talking about your life and music and the new album, and best of luck with everything.
That's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on, Joe. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and minds in the UK, Kansas City, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Dom for his time and story. Want to hear more Neon Jazz interviews? You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us at YouTube, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.